Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, everyone. I'm Kim Travis, Engagement Coordinator in the Affordable Rental Housing Division, helping to facilitate the training today about the ORCA. We are recording and we'll make this training available on our website. And today we're going to be talking about the ORCA, the Oregon Centralized Application. The ORCA is the process through which the Affordable Rental Housing Division allocates loans, grants, tax credit funding for the construction of new housing or preservation of existing affordable housing. So you're in the right space if that's why you're here today. I'm going to turn it over to Ed Brown.
All right, thank you, Kim. Yeah, good afternoon. I am Ed Brown. I am the Development Applications Team Manager. The Applications Team is a new group within OHCS that administers the end-to-end ORCA application system. We provide quality assurance, tracking, and facilitate communication, both internally and externally. We're very excited to have this new dedicated group to focus on continuous improvement of our applications process, holding capacity to return to NOFA improvement in the past is once we've started an annual cycle, that's something that's always been really challenging to do in the past. Making this process better and clearer is this team's main focus. And so we're still a new group, but we're really excited about the mission and we're digging in really quickly. So I am co-piloting today's training with Kim, and we have several expert speakers to join us in presenting this information. And we're all excited to share the ORCA with you and explain how this new system works.
All right, we have three primary objectives today. We want to be able to provide an overview of the ORCA process and highlight resources on the ORCA website so you can follow up and read materials and know where to find things after this training's completed. And we want to do our best to respond to your questions today. So we have about 90 minutes today to accomplish these objectives. And as a facilitator, we'll go to the next slide, wanting to just offer process agreements here to help foster an inclusive environment. We have been training with the Center for Equity and Inclusion and using these process agreements with our own internal teams here at OHCS, and just appreciate you practicing with us as we want to set an inclusive environment today. And we'll move on to the next slide here with the agenda. As you can see, we have a lot of topics we want to cover with you today, so we will be following this agenda during the training and covering these topics in order. For about the first hour, we will provide an overview of the ORCA through step one, through the impact assessment. So we want to focus and get through those materials and that content, and then we'll stop and take your questions before we move on to cover the steps 2 and 3 of the ORCA process. And then we'll take your remaining questions before closing. All along the way, we'll be monitoring the chat and we'll try to answer questions through the chat, although we may save some questions if it's easier to answer them live when we stop for questions in about an hour or so. Just please note that we're not going to be able to answer project-specific questions today. Turn it over to Ed.
All right. Okay, so we're going to be using this graphic throughout this presentation to help relate which step we're on in the ORCA process. This graphic represents the entire lifespan of a project development, typically taking maybe anywhere from 2 to 3 years, including early planning and forming of a project concept through the ORCA funding process, then into construction, and then long-term operations with monitoring and compliance. The timeline for how quickly a project can move through the ORCA process is based on project readiness and responsiveness to submission materials for OHCS evaluation, which is evaluated by meeting standards at each step of the ORCA. We'll highlight the 3 steps of the ORCA in this next slide. Okay, so these 4 chevrons represent the ORCA applications process. Today, we'll discuss the 3 steps of the ORCA with an intake form submission that is our catalyst to start the ORCA process. The intake form is the early point for all affordable rental housing resources. It is designed to be completed in a single sitting or session that communicates a high-level overview of the project's development planning. Once we understand your project, we can better determine what the appropriate next steps are. Providing OHCS with early project concepts through the intake form also helps us see the total landscape of affordable housing development in our state over the next several years or so. So the ORCA deconstructs the former competitive NOFA process, which was a single point in time submission and review, now into 3 steps. And I'll explain each step and relate at times where elements might be familiar to the old NOFA process. Okay, so a couple of things that we'll cover before jumping into those steps. One of these things here is there are many benefits to the new centralized process. The central component of this new process means that there is more uniformity in policy, documentation, and requirements. By creating a single vehicle for the many programs and funding streams, we've reduced the amount of content both our staff and partners need to know to and understand to be successful in applying for funding. So the ORCA creates opportunities for projects to receive early input, feedback, guidance to help work through each step of the application. In this new open process, OHCS can now provide meaningful feedback early in development, whereas in the past, we could only determine if a project were eligible or ineligible and close the door after making that determination. This opens new opportunity for us to be a better partner and more collaborative. So the new process enables projects to be shared with the Housing Stability Council much sooner in a project's development life cycle. This will give the council greater opportunity to provide input at a point in the development that isn't already hard baked into the project. More interactions with the project at each step will help us consider unique circumstances and establish more realistic timelines for closing. So we're excited about all these many elements of this new process. So where to start? Where can I find this information about the ORCA? So as of last week, we provided a whole new ORCA space on OHCS's website. Kimberly's going to shoot a direct link to the new ORCA pages in the chat, and I'll explain how you can find it yourself from a simple Google search. So you can see here, if you Google OHCS, our comms team has been on top of it. OHCS is going to pop up first. Once you've entered OHCS's main landing page, if you scroll down just a bit, you're going to get to these vertical buckets, and that's that second picture there. Each of these categories, there are web gurus calling these buckets. The first link under the housing development is a link for our new ORCA pages. So once you're in there, you're going to have access to all of our new ORCA content. And that's the area that we're going to be talking a lot about. All right, so these new pages provide the ORCA manual, information about ORCA steps, available resources, trainings, our questions portal, which is new, and we'll tell you all about it a little bit later. Our FAQs, and then a link to the intake form and also the pre-qualification request form is also found in these pages. And to explain these forms, I'm going to hand it over to Tara Bassis, and she's going to take us through the next couple slides to explain both of those.
Hi, everyone. Pre-qualification for registration can happen early in the ORCA process, however, isn't required until completing tasks and impact assessment. To become an OHCS registered developer or developer consultant, entities must complete the pre-qualification form. In this submission, developers move through portfolio performance, development experience, and organization continuity. Both developers and consultants conclude with OHCS integrity certification. Once processed, the entity may be registered as an approved housing developer or developer consultant. We're not going to go over this today. Kimberly will pop this link in chat for a tutorial and to the Get Help pages. The ORCA entry point begins with the intake form. The intake form is a survey-styled submission that asks you to provide early project information, such as applicant details, project concept, financial strategy, and identified partners. The intake asks for high-level information. We understand that not every project will be ready to provide all the information requested, and we recognize that aspects may change after you submit the intake form as elements of your project may change. No information submitted in the intake form is binding. The intake form simply opens a conversation with OHCS staff about where the project stands today. This form also allows applicants to identify interest in pre-development funding and capacity building needs. There are two outcomes associated with the intake form submission. The first is there are no questions about the intake submission or questions have been answered, and the project is ready to move forward to apply for resources. The second is a project remains in intake with the application team while early concept details are gathered, or given this intake process is a rolling process, there may not be available resources at the time of submitting the intake form. A project's intake may also stay with the application team if there are already two projects in impact assessment, as only two projects may be in each step. We're also not going to walk through the intake form today. And again, Kimberly will put into chat an intake orientation video and for the Get Help pages.
Ed, you're muted.
Thank you, Kim. Sorry about that. Thank you, Tara. And before we get started walking through the ORCA process, in the first step, I want to highlight an area where we've heard a lot of input and questions surrounding subsidy limits. And so you're going to find the subsidy limits in the ORCA manual under the cost controls section starting on page 7 of that document. And you can find that document on our web pages. With that, our subsidy limits are designed to be responsive to the varying needs of different projects, scale based on size of the units and the area median income they serve, respond to lower rent rates in rural communities with significantly lower AMIs. And additionally, subsidies are available for projects with unique building challenges that address tenant life, safety, and health needs. So for example, these funds can be used for agricultural workforce housing, accessibility improvements, or durable construction materials, and allows for OHCS's Finance Committee to approve increases of up to 10% above these limits as projects approach final resource commitment. Next, I'm going to hand over to Kate Allen to talk to us about the technical advisors and their role with the new ORCA process.
Good afternoon. So good to be here with so many of you. My name is Kate Allen. I am the manager of the Technical Advisors team. So Oregon Housing and Community Services has developed set-asides to ensure geographic distribution of resources as well as to address historic inequities to accessing our resources. We are also excited to have a new technical advisor team to support the goals of the set-asides. Technical advisors are connecting with culturally specific developers, rural nonprofit developers, rural housing authorities, and tribal housing developers to help navigate the ORCA process, connect eligible organizations with pre-development and capacity building resources, and build productive working relationships with all of our partners to increase the pipeline. The technical advisor email can be found on the Get Help with the ORCA page of the ORCA website. And for more information about the set-asides, you can also check the link on the main ORCA landing page.
All right, and hopefully we'll hear from Martin here on pre-development loan program. Do we have you, Martin?
You sure do. Hello, everyone. So the pre-development loan program is a new program. We've just recently gotten money from the legislature to start, and it comes in two different kinds. There's the project feasibility loan. These are small loans, maximum 50K, to determine whether or not a project is feasible. So small organizations that are CSOs or rural nonprofits don't have to expend limited resources to determine even if the project can go forward. We can lend this amount of money so that they can do those studies and make sure that it's even worthwhile for them as an organization to pursue it going forward to, the next type of pre-development, the pre-development loan. This is open to a wider group of people. Nonprofits, housing authorities, and tribes are all eligible. And we will loan up to $750K. These are basically, we've conceived of this pre-development loan fund as to help organizations prepare and submit all of the documents associated with the impact assessment stage that we'll be discussing later. You can also work with another third-party lender like a CDFI to get matching funds for a larger pre-development loan. The application process is through the intake form, and I look forward to helping organizations out. Thank you.
Moving along. Going to move along to capacity building grants, and going to give the mic over to Kimi.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kimie Ueoka. I manage the capacity building program here in the Affordable Rental Housing Division. Within the ORCA intake form, eligible organizations will be able to apply for ORCA capacity building grants to help strengthen their capacity to build and operate affordable rental housing. This specific offering is only available to nonprofit developers and sponsor organizations, tribal nations, and tribal housing entities, and housing authorities. We are planning for other offerings that will be available to additional entity types. So stay tuned, keep on top of your technical advisories. Those will come out as they are built and ready to launch. So the ORCA capacity building grant applicants may request up to $150,000 to be used over 2 years. There are 2 paths to the capacity building application within the ORCA intake form. There'll be one for those with a new development to submit and one for applicants without a new development to submit. In order to keep this rolling application window open and the volume of work sustainable, we're going to open applications to eligible applicants in phased groups. There's a lot more information, a lot more detailed information about all of this on the GHAT capacity building website. And I look forward to working with you all someday soon. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And then Daniel, go ahead and let you come on. And Daniel's going to go ahead and explain some of the Procorum Work Center task navigation. We've had Procorum in the past, but he's going to go ahead and explain some of the greater ways in which we're utilizing the software in the ORCA process.
Thank you, Ed. Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel. I'm a member of the applications team, and I will be going over very high-level overview of Procorum, work centers, and task navigation. A little bit about Procorum. Procorum is a secure portal used to manage documents and complete task assignments. Procorum allows applicants to receive notifications about their projects and enables projects to be tracked in real time. All communications will take place inside of your work center, so all that information will be kept in one place. Again, this will be a very high-level overview. We strongly encourage that everyone check out our YouTube tutorials, which will go into greater detail on everything that I touch on today. So let's go take a quick look at a work center. Let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. All right. So after completing the intake step, your project will be assigned a work center in Procorum. The person listed as the primary contact will receive an email, which will contain a secure portal login to Procorum. If you want our application team to add additional members, you may make that request to our app team email, which will be provided in the chat. So here you see, this is what you will see when you get your work center. You can see that we have files. We're able to access and navigate through files. Posts, which enables communication between you and us. Tasks, which we'll go over in just a minute. A calendar, as well as an activity log, which just logs all activities that happen in the work center. Of course, not pulling up right now. So let's jump into tasks. And again, super high level here. I'm going to go ahead and click into this task here. And so when you go into a task, you'll see that every task has a task title, as well as a description that includes instructions on how to complete that particular task. Location is where you will upload completed documents. Many tasks, be on the lookout for this, many tasks will have files that are attached directly to the task. You can download directly from here. Once you complete a document that you download, go and check out where that location is for you to upload it. So here we have files, impact assessment, and applications. So you go to files, you will go to impact assessment, and here applications. Click in that, go to upload files, and here you could either drag and drop or you could choose a file. And after doing so, go into upload, and that'll be that. When you're done with a task, so you've completed a document, it's been uploaded, go back into the task, and you will click on Mark Finish. You want to finish the task? Yes, I do. And go to the bottom, save and return. It'll bring you back to the task list, and you will see that there is now a check mark. Essentially, you will follow that same process to complete all tasks. Again, this is very high level overview for today. All projects that are ready for impact assessment will be getting work centers on June 12th. And again, I want to encourage everyone to check out our tutorials, which again, go into much greater detail on all their operations in Procorum. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it back to Ed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So while we're getting the slides back up here, give us just a moment. Okay, perfect. So yeah, the link to the training video that Daniel mentioned should be in the chat. I do highly recommend that. Again, that was a really brief demonstration, but we want to kind of give an overview of some of the cool capabilities we have for submission now of the application materials. And that video, if you've ever been frustrated with Procorum, it really goes end to end and will really make you experienced in Procorum and help you navigate more efficiently. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about the first step of the ORCA process, the impact assessment. The impact assessment step evaluates project alignment with OHCS policy priorities through planning and documentation. So this step is started by interacting with and completing the assigned tasks in your Procorum Work Center, as we just saw. And as you're also shown in our training videos, you'll see the impact assessment tasks under that task grouping, the impact assessment task grouping. These tasks range from OHCS forms, often referred to as supplementals, that applicants need to download, complete, and re-upload to their work centers to submit, as well as other tasks to upload documentation required by OHCS. Additionally, this step has an application that consists of narrative components and the project's initial proforma. So this version of OHCS's proforma is a higher level, more generalized line items proforma. The values you provide in this early proforma may change at this stage as the project develops. The link at the bottom of this page, the link that is at the bottom of this page that is also now making its way into our chat is another training video that builds on the Procorum navigation video that we saw on the last slide. And it elaborates more specifically on completing the impact assessment step and how to navigate that in Procorum. So it's a good follow-on video to watch. All right, so this is a list of ORCA standards from A to Z in the impact assessment step. Projects can stay in this step for up to a year or maybe more to complete all of the tasks associated with the impact assessment application. All projects have different variables and may be entering this process at different stages. And this new process allows projects to move forward at their own pace. However, inactivity or failure to fulfill standards within 12 months at this step may necessitate the removal of a project from the application process. And just to elaborate, what we mean by that is if you get started maybe in a month, you have a lot of progress, but maybe for some reason the project falls off. If we don't see any activity in this work center for a number of months, quarters, and we reach out, we don't hear any response back, then we may let that work center go. If later that project comes back to us and says, hey, we've got new life, then great, we'll have you come through that intake form. We'll get some new information about the project. We'll create a new work center at that point. So as you're working through the impact assessment tasks, in some cases, you could be working towards tasks in following steps of the ORCA prior to completing the impact assessment step. However, there are some limitations to that. So for example, an easy one, we don't want to see your final pro forma before we even see your initial pro forma. So that's a task that you wouldn't be able to work ahead on. But another example is, say you have your environmental site assessment, your phase 1 completed. That's required in the next step. But if you already have that documentation now, you can go ahead and submit that documentation to that step in that to that task in that next step. So there's some functionality of this where you can go ahead and work as you're able to within the tasks that we have. Just understanding that we're not going to evaluate that documentation until we get to that step. So as you submit documents in this step, your project and submissions will not be reviewed until you've successfully completed all of the tasks in the impact assessment step. The project evaluation at this step must be done holistically. So many items on this slide should look familiar. We've not totally redesigned development. Today, we're only going to be plucking out a few of these to talk about where there may have been more significant change to the old NOFA ways. But we don't have time to dive deep on every item on this list. So complete information about all of the items on this list you can find in the ORCA manual inside both on our new webpage and also inside your work centers when we provide access to those. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right, so the ORCA has 2 separate pro forma. The impact assessment pro forma allows us to understand a conceptual level of understanding of the project financials compared to the comprehensive full pro forma in the financial impact pro forma, which is more akin to the NOFA pro forma in past years. It'll look more familiar to that, the one that we find in the next step. For the impact assessment pro forma, the one that we have at this stage, asks for higher level, more generalized budget criteria. So the sources and uses in particular are more of what we consider back at the napkin estimates, with uses summarized into higher level categories. We're not asking for fully baked pro forma in this step, nor are we trying to fully analyze the project budget at this point. We want to understand from where the sources are planned to come from as opposed to committed sources only, which is something we'll get to in farther steps down the road. So this is an example of one way in which we're getting involved more early in the project development. So this will allow staff to do an early check for financial feasibility. And if the project meets all other standards reviewed at this stage, we can conditionally hold resources for projects through a letter of intent after the Housing Stability Council's review. And we'll talk more about that as well. So the financial components of this step are intended to be early estimates that serve as a starting point to understand needs for this project. However, estimates should be realistic. Substantive changes later to what is provided at this step could require the applicant or the project to resubmit their impact assessment application with updated project information. So construction cost estimates and narrative responses in the application help to provide more context to this higher level performance during our review. All right. So in general, many of the evaluation standards are pre-existing standards from previous NOFA, but are enhanced in this new process. And for example, the DEI agreement. The DEI agreement uses goals established by the Global Diversity and Inclusion Benchmarks, or the GDEIB guidebook, developed by the Center of Global Inclusion. The DEI agreement was introduced into the NOFA back in 2019. We are evolving this requirement from simply agreeing to static statements to a dynamic process with a registry for sponsors to submit their DEI agreement and goal commitments, of which there are a number to choose from. The new process will require sponsors and project partners to fill out a short survey where they will select 4 DEI goals to make progress on and self-report annually to update their DEI goals to indicate where they have made progress. We want to understand where support may be needed from our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Office, or EDI office. For engagement and community needs, sponsors provide narrative responses in the application that include engagement conducted by partner organizations, or CBOs, working in the community, and explain how that is informing the project design. And then with equity and racial justice strategy, there are a set of narrative questions in the application that we will show in the next slide. It's hard to fit it all in one. For the ERJ evaluation standard, applicants will respond to these 4 narrative questions in the application and respond to at least 2 out of the 6 strategies that we'll cover in the next slide after this one. So for tenant demographic data collection, we need tenant demographic data. If you've already submitted this data to OHCS on an existing portfolio project, you're covered. If not, please let us know your plan for gathering this information for the project. Translation of materials. Be sure to reference your affirmative fair housing marketing plan, then detail your plan for translating outreach materials, lease-up documentation, and other information. For project management language and translation proficiency, describe how your property management team will communicate with tenants. If your staff speaks the tenant's language or languages, or you have partnerships through MOUs, include this information in your strategy, in the narratives of the application. And then lastly on this slide, existing racial equity efforts. So we want you to share the steps your organization is taking to advance racial equity. If there are specific commitments in your DEI agreement related to racial equity, then include that in your narrative. All right, and then on to ERJ evaluation standards. You will respond to the ERJ evaluation standards within your application. You need to respond to at least 2 of these 6 strategies. If you're able to respond to more, we would like you to respond to as many as you're able to. Remember, all partnership agreements must be legally binding to qualify. For more on each of these 6 strategies, please refer to the ORCA manual. Remember, you only need to respond to 2 to at least 2 of these. All right, can we just excuse me. Okay, so let's talk about location standards. We need to ensure that projects provide access to critical resources and amenities that help tenants thrive. This includes boosting their economic and social mobility while addressing racial and ethnic inequities. Each project location must meet at least 2 of the 6 opportunity area criteria. These include proximity to parks, grocery stores, and public transportation, as well as having a good walk score. For projects that can meet at least 2 of these area opportunity criteria, then a project must meet at least, projects that cannot meet at least 2 of these criteria, then the project must meet at least 2 criteria from the anti-displacement index. This helps us protect vulnerable populations from displacement and ensures stable housing. So the list for that is going to be on the next slide, and I'm also going to be handing off to Stephen to demonstrate for us the anti-displacement index tool. All right, so with that, I'll go ahead and hand over to you, Stephen, and have you, give us a demonstration of that great new tool that we have for this process.
Just one moment while I get the screen sharing up. All right. Okay, just 1 second here.
Just give that another shot. We're just a little bit slow to unshare. Be ready for your share.
All right. There we go. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephen Cole, a research analyst here at OHCS, and today I would like to give you a very brief overview on how to assess your proposed project in order to meet the criteria for our anti-displacement index. And we can do this by using the mapping application presented on our screen, which is our newly created Oregon Housing Insights tool. And for our purposes, we'll be using the displacement analysis section. So how do you use this tool? First, as you may already know, to meet the standards outlined by the impact assessment application, you must meet at least 2 of the 5 displacement criteria. Please note the application and the tool itself will tell you the details of each criterion, so just focus on what you need to know to find out if your project meets the requirement. And to evaluate if your project meets the displacement criteria, we've made the process relatively straightforward. As you can see on the map, some of the areas are colored yellow, and for these areas, they meet the requirement. It's that simple. So for every census tract, which are the colored areas, if it's colored yellow or red, it's acceptable according to the impact assessment application process. Yellow means the census tract meets 2 to 3 of the criteria, and red means 4 and above are met. And here's where you can find the displacement info for a particular address. First, click on the tab to hide the displacement info menu on the right, revealing the search bar here. We'll use, then you'll enter the address. We'll use OHCS's address, copy this. You can see the census tract is yellow and it's adjacent to a red one. Interesting. Next, what you want to do is click on the map. A pop-up will show further details for that specific census tract. And it will tell you the displacement criteria met and the census tract's overall displacement risk. And with that, you know if an address meets the requirement or not. Another feature of this tool is the ability to find out if a specific address is in a rural area or an urban area. And the way to do this again is to enter the address that you're interested in the search bar. We use Timberline Lodge. So let me just copy that address right here. All right. Click on the map to show the pop-up again. And what you want to do is click on the menu arrow right here, and you'll see the region information, and you'll see if it's rural or not. For Timberline Lodge, it's in a rural area. And that's it, folks. Of course, if you have any questions about the tool or the anti-displacement index itself, you can reach me by email, which you can do by clicking this About button right here. And I thank you for your time. I'll give the presentation over to Michael Parkhurst.
Thank you, Stephen. My name is Michael Parkhurst. I'm the Policy and Initiatives Manager here in ARH, and I'm walking you through the next couple of items in impact assessment. First one here is MWESB. OHCS seeks to further workforce equity through goals we've established for contracting with minority-owned, women-owned, and emerging small businesses. These requirements vary by MWESB region. Essentially, it's 30% for Portland Metro and 20% for the other 4 regions of the state, the rest of the state. The general contractor and the applicant may include non-COVID certified firms owned by Black people, Indigenous people, and/or other people of color. These non-COVID firms can self-certify as MWESB owned if they meet the COVID firm requirements, and we encourage folks to get that COVID certification during the course of the project. This section of the ORCA asks about past performance meeting MWESB goals in OHCS funded projects, prior collaboration with general contractors and their experience with MWESB requirements, and plans to meet MWESB goals on the current project. So there are basically 3 categories. Developers who've worked with OHCS funded projects in the past and have met goals on past projects, there are no further requirements. You basically just need to let us know you believe you've met the requirement. If you are new to OHCS, you've not completed any OHCS funded projects, you need to answer the questions in this section of the impact assessment and provide any requested materials that go along with it. For developers who have completed projects, if you have fallen short on goals for more than 1 project since 2021, you need to complete those narrative questions, and we are requiring people to hire a consultant. There's fortunately a very short list of folks in this category. If you've completed an OHCS funded project but didn't meet the goal on just 1 project, then you're not required to hire a consultant. You may still choose to do that to improve your performance, but we're not requiring that. You just have to fill out the 10 questions. I will point out the language in the ORCA instruction document we recently discovered is not crystal clear and doesn't match exactly with what I just said. And we will at some point address that in a future version of the ORCA instruction. So now I will move on to the preservation category. Preservation is rather different than new construction. We expect demand for these resources to far outstrip the resources that are available. So unlike new construction, we need to prioritize how we will reward preservation. We have established 3 categories here. If you've been part of the preservation discussions with us, these should look very familiar. I'm going to walk through each of these in order. For the first 2, what we're really aiming to do is build out an ongoing ranked list, a standing list of ranked projects that we will fund in order from the top of the list to the bottom as funds allow. So if you're on the list and you're not funded right away this year, you at least know that as soon as we can get more resources, you are in a very good position to get that project funded. That's the high level goal behind the preservation approach here. I'm going to walk through these next 2 slides and talk a bit about each of these categories. I guess there's 3 slides actually. So for existing projects that have federal project-based rent assistance, so usually we're talking about USDA rural development, rent assistance contracts, or HUD program contracts for rent assistance attached to the property. If those are at risk, if there's a genuine risk that the owner may not renew those contracts, they will be prioritized according to this scheme. So it's really about how urgent is that risk? Is it coming up right away? And we're concentrating funds on properties that have at least 50% of the properties, 50% of the units have project-based rent assistance. So pretty simple there. If we need to go to a tiebreaker in this category, we'll look at community need, which is really about evaluating the availability of other rent-restricted housing in that community.
Not super useful, but
if you have a project with project-based rent assistance and it's not really in danger that the owner is going to opt out, if you're not really looking at opting out, but the project still needs help, it still needs attention, you might be a good candidate for the next category. We can go to the next slide here. So these are projects that are at risk for physical or financial challenges. So basically the long list of projects we all know that have major deferred rehab needs. There may be some financial operating challenges that cash flow is never going to get you out of. And the prioritization here is a little bit more complicated. Again, we really expect demand to exceed funding. We're looking to establish a queue where we can fund from the top to the bottom of the list. If we're able to fund all of the projects in the critical priority, we move to the high priority, etc. So that for the critical priority to get to the top of the list, we're looking for projects owned by a culturally specific organization where the project is currently at risk. And you'll justify that in some narrative questions explaining to us how you see the project currently at risk. You don't have to have a capital needs assessment at the impact stage. If you have one, it's helpful to submit that. But if you don't have that and want to basically wait and see where you rank on the priority list, we've set it up so that you can wait until you're more likely to get funding before you initiate the CNA. And then tenant vulnerability is a measure we've defined with a 2-part test. So it's how many households in that project are severely rent burdened and exhibit one or more of the following characteristics. There's a person in the household with a disability, person in the household who's 62 or older, person in the house, if there are children in the household under 18, residents that identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color, or residents who are immigrants and refugees. So basically all of those categories were established because we know those folks all experience significant challenges to finding alternatives if they lose access to their currently affordable housing. So that tenant vulnerability index applies across these categories. So we will, again, basically be using this matrix to define a list and be able to make that public to folks so they'll see where they're at on the list. The application focuses on evidence that the project's at risk. The tenant survey information is going to be very important there in establishing the vulnerability. And if we need to go to a tiebreaker, we will look at community need, as I talked about a minute ago, and then maybe the percentage of tenants that are vulnerable if we need to go to a second tiebreaker, where people are looking at the same community or comparable community. We can go to the last preservation slide. So portfolio stabilization program, we talked with Housing Council about this back in 2022 and are still finalizing rules around this, but it's meant to be a last resort option to stabilize properties that are really in trouble right now and have looked for all other funding sources and really exhausted all their options. The idea here is you would work with our asset management folks to tailor a specific limited package to meet the immediate needs of that property in alignment with the property improvement plan you've worked out with our asset management team. Again, we're still defining final program rules. This is not quite stood up yet, but it will be in the next few months. And as soon as we can start awarding funds here, we're really excited about being able to offer this tool. I want to point out sponsors will not receive a developer fee if they receive a PSP award. So that was a lot. I appreciate people bearing with me. I think I am turning it back to Ed.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Okay, and we'll run to the, oh, we're already there. All right, so getting back into the impact assessment step, we're already still in it, but just kind of getting back to the relating to the standards. So, so these are the last two standards that we're going to talk about before we get into sort of the evaluation component of this first step. And that's the infrastructure readiness and permit plan. So infrastructure readiness, let's talk about applicants need to ensure that key infrastructure such as stormwater, water and sewer services are available at the site. If these services aren't currently available, you'll need to explain your plan to extend them to the site. This includes identifying funding sources to meet the infrastructure needs. For permit plan, early communication with the permitting jurisdiction is crucial, and the reason why we're asking at this early step. We want you to develop a plan and timeline for acquiring the necessary permits, ensuring that they align with the project milestones. It's essential to confirm that you'll be able to secure these permits by the time OHCS awards final funding. Okay, so once you've completed all of the tasks assigned to the project under the impact assessment task group, OHCS will conduct an evaluation of the project to ensure that it meets all of the required standards. As I stated at the beginning of the impact assessment slides, this may take up to a year or longer to complete this step. Some of you are wondering, well, how fast can this happen? And for applicants who are substantially ready to provide all application material, respond to all of the narrative questions, it is possible to complete your application for this step in as little as a week. So we've seen that so far. OHCS staff will not be reviewing your submissions as you post them. Evaluation will occur only once you have completed all of the impact assessment steps in a project in a Procorum Work Center. The last task in this step is to signify that your project is ready for an evaluation. And that sort of helps trigger our attention to come and look at that. Once you've marked this task, the application team will invoice your project for the application charge through a Procorum task. For non-LIHTC projects, this will likely be $2,500. That's the standard charge for state resources, unless there's some unique element that might change that value. This next part is the really exciting piece for OHCS. OHCS is now accepting digital payments. We are now, and now with the new ORCA system, we are actually only accepting payments digitally. So no more paper checks, please. We will no longer accept paper check payments with the new ORCA system. So instructions for payment is provided in that invoice that we're going to be communicating to you through your work center through these tasks. Once payment has been received, your Procorum Work Center will be locked for 30 days, during which time OHCS will conduct an evaluation of the application to determine if it meets those ORCA standards that we've talked about. Just prior to that evaluation, the applications team will do a review of documents to confirm that your submissions have successfully met the standards for submission. The applications team will reach out for clarification if that's needed. So for example, if a document happens to be missing or crucial questions were simply missed, the applications team will respond back to you. We'll let you back into your work center, and we are going to provide commentary and feedback in those tasks. So again, inside those tasks, there's a comments section. We're going to uncheck those tasks as completed. So previously in your work center, you had everything marked as completed. Now all of a sudden you've got 1 or 4 or 5 tasks that are suddenly incomplete again. That'll be your signal that you need to go into those and check into the comments to see exactly what it is that the applications team is asking you to do. Once you've repaired that or submitted documents, once again, ready for evaluation, you can click that last task again that you are ready for an evaluation, which time the application will go ahead and review those elements. Assuming that the application is now ready for evaluation, we'll go ahead and ensure that, again, the work center is closed down for that 30-day review period. And our reviewers will begin to work in that pro forma and an application begin to determine if it meets those standards. Oh, a little bit too far.
Sorry.
That's all right. All right. So let's say in this scenario that all of these standards are met. So during the 30-day evaluation period, OHCS staff finds that the project meets all of the standards in the impact assessment step. OHCS staff will then prepare to recommend the project for a funding intent letter at the next Housing Stability Council meeting. If the council agrees, then upon approval by the Housing Stability Council, the sponsor will be greeted back to the work center by its assigned production analyst with a funding letter of intent. It'll be your first task in the financial eligibility step to sign and agree to the letter's conditions. So for more detail about the impact assessment and its standards, please review the ORCA manual and additional training materials that we're providing today. All right. With that, we are going to move into our first questions section. I'm going to hand it back over to Kim to facilitate.
All right. Yeah, that was a lot of information. Thanks, team. And thank you all for the great questions in the chat. I think we were able to answer most of them as we've gone along here. But we will finish up here. There's a couple of unanswered questions, so we'll take those live. Before we do that, I just want to let everybody know we will be following up so you will get all the links that we've put in the chat, because there's been a lot of information being shared via chat. So we will be sending a follow-up email with all of these links, so you will have them. All right, let's see. I think we have one unanswered question in the chat that came in from Jillian. So I'd like to turn that over to either Michael Parkhurst or yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So I think the rationale, Jillian, is the portfolio stabilization, which again is really focused on specific properties with major issues. It's kind of a rescue operation for troubled properties. So it's not really, we're not considering it a development source like other preservation funding. So we understand there may be some costs on the operator's side, but we're also trying to balance between sort of aligning incentives. This is for a very limited number of cases where folks don't have any other alternatives. And it's basically like a short-term rescue operation. And it doesn't preclude you from coming in a few years later for kind of the full meal deal rehab project.
I see. Okay. So maybe I misunderstood the portfolio stabilization. Is that just for financial stabilization or for stabilization of physical issues with the property as well?
I think it will also address short-term urgent physical repair needs. Like if you've got units offline or that kind of thing, or there's some real imminent health or safety risk. It's also partly intended as honestly like a carrot to get owners to talk with asset management and be really candid about the challenges they're experiencing and develop a property improvement plan to really stabilize the property.
Yeah, I think I'll just say this and then I'll stop talking and let somebody else talk. It would not be possible for a small developer or a property owner to hire a consultant to help them if they can receive no developer fee. So if they don't have in-house capacity to do a rehab without having any developer fee, they also can't buy capacity. And so it's just something to consider, especially for small, culturally specific rural and chodos, that really is limiting how good a job they can do with whatever repairs they need to do if they can't pay anyone to help them.
Appreciate the feedback. Yeah, and we'll definitely be keeping an eye on how this works out.
Thanks, Jillian. Okay, we have hands raised. We'll go Mac, Shane, and Adam, and then we'll also be monitoring the chat as well.
Hi, Kim. Thank you so much. Yeah, I have a question. I just want to make sure, particularly for the anti-displacement piece, that I'm understanding that correctly. Did I hear that a project has to be located within a site that meets the minimum criteria of having at least 2 points? And if it is not within that track, it would not be eligible to move forward?
Okay, so like location criteria question for our team. Let's see who might be able to. Mitch, do you
I
want
can
to
take that, Kim.
jump on? Great.
Yeah. So Mac, it's an either or. Typically, it could be both, I guess, theoretically. But if you're in one of those census tracts that is identified as having 2 of the 5 displacement risk factors, that means your project is good to move forward past the location preferences section. If it does not, you would have to meet 2 of the 6 opportunity area criteria that are there, which were listed out before. It includes access to green space, access to early childhood education, access to high quality schools, transit access, food access, and I think one other that I'm forgetting, but it's in the ORCA manual. So it's either or, either you meet the opportunity area criteria or you meet the anti-displacement criteria for that location scoring.
Okay, got it. That is reassuring to hear. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think we're on to Adam.
Okay, thank you very much. I wanted to ask, with the old NOFA process, we could see with any given funding source what the allocations were for rural Oregon and what it was for the other areas. So what I'm curious is, for this new ORCA process, as we're all looking at potential projects in our respective areas, how will we know and track, to be able to get a sense of how much funding might be still available for a geographic area for any specific type of housing? Will you guys be running some sort of a monitoring page on your website where we can see, as projects are getting approved, what is remaining in the gas tank for housing for our respective areas in the state?
Yeah.
That's
a great question. And we're going to cover that in the next steps, but we'll reference it here. Our data and research team is currently developing a dashboard. So there will be a publicly available dashboard to track as resources are allocated and then remaining resources. And I believe that will be by set aside area as well. So yes, we want to make sure that there's visibility about the resources that have been committed and then the remaining resources. And our objective is to, maintain that and keep that fresh so that people have a good handle on what's available. Anyone else on our team want to jump in on the dashboard or being able to track and monitor resource availability? Or did I get it? Did I cover it?
I was gonna say, I feel like you covered it really well, Kim. Yeah, we're our new website is going to have a portal for that specifically. It's something that's still under development, but we're tracking that through our Procorum ProLink system. So as funds are allocated, they'll update to our website so that everyone can see that.
All right. Thank you for that. And I thought I saw a third hand, but maybe the question was answered. If I'm missing you, please come off mute. Okay. How are we doing on questions in the chat? Let's see. And please feel free. We have a few more minutes here. We're a bit ahead of schedule, so don't hesitate to jump in with your questions. Okay. And we're answering the questions. Yes.
There was a question about if we're not doing LIHTC, since there are no tax credits, will utility allowances be required? And I believe the answer to that is yes.
Thank you, Becky.
You're welcome.
Okay. I think we've covered all of your questions so far. But I'll just give us another 30 seconds here before we move on. In case I've missed something or if someone wants to ask another question. Okay. All right, well, we will have time for any additional questions that you have before we break today. So with that, we'll move on to the second step in the ORCA process.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and provide you some more information and things to ask questions about. So we have another question session coming up after the next two steps, so don't worry. So coming back to this graphic, we are moving into the next two steps of the ORCA. The project is now in the financial eligibility step, step 2. So remember, the project has met and committed to certain standards at this point. It has been presented to the Housing Stability Council for approval. The project now has an OHCS letter of intent to fund the project. That letter comes with a not to exceed funding ceiling for the project based on the subsidy maximum criteria that we talked about earlier. And again, in the manual. So the next two steps are going to go a little bit quicker because we've already covered quorum and other apparatus around the applications process. So now we can stick more closely to the standards and timing of these next two steps. Okay, now that sponsors are invited back into the project work center, you'll begin working toward the tasks under the financial eligibility task grouping. In this step, we focus on assessing the financial viability of each project. The goal is to ensure that projects have the necessary financial backing and realistic cost estimates. Most assigned tasks related to external documents, most assigned tasks are related to external documents that we require from partners to provide to OHCS staff for evaluation and approval. We require several key documents, including lender letters, detailed construction cost estimates, and a comprehensive pro forma. The pro forma at this step is going to be really similar or familiar looking to the old NOVA process. So timing wise, this step should take no more than a year prior to financial closing, but projects could progress more quickly depending on responsiveness to submitting the required documentation and completing those tasks. Evaluation standards for this step include submitting more refined details to your project, including items listed here. Projects must submit updated architectural plans. For new construction, this includes floor plans and elevations. Again, generally, the further along we go in these steps, the more finished and final we want to see. So for rehab projects, a capital needs assessment and detailed scope of work is required at this point. Applicants need to provide detailed construction cost estimates, tracking costs to line items within the pro forma. A comprehensive financial pro forma is crucial, showing a fully developed budget. So letters of interest from lenders and investors demonstrate financial backing, and applicants must either confirm permit submissions or provide a signed plan for permitting. All right, and further on evaluation standards are more strict in this step to ensure that the project readiness and adherence to approved project criteria from the council in compliance with standards met in previous steps. So deviations from proposed timelines or plans can result in returning to the impact assessment step to reevaluate a project for approval. OHCS applies industry standard underwriting guidelines to assess risk and viability. Along with the ORCA manual, OHCS has also released an updated general policy and guideline manual, the GPGM. Also available on our website, also available in your quorum work centers. Once a project meets all financial eligibility criteria, it can move forward to the commitment step, bringing it closer to fruition. All right. Last time I'll show you this graphic. We are now on to the last step of the ORCA, the commitment step. This step evaluates the financial aspects of the project, including adherence to underwriting standards and budget review. The commitment step should be initiated no more than 9 months before closing. The commitment step is the final phase of the ORCA application process. This step ensures all project details are finalized, setting the stage for funding. Essential documents include final architectural plans, financial pro forma, cost estimates, permit approval, and investor commitments. Projects are evaluated based on adherence to the proposed timelines and plans. HUD subsidy layering ensures financial viability for projects using home and HTF funds. A financial closing date commitment letter is mandatory. Upon meeting all criteria, a reservation letter will now be issued to the project confirming funding and readiness to proceed within 6 months. So that is a much harder timeline. So there's a hard expectation from OHCS at this point that the project will close within this period. If the project is unable to close within the agreed upon timing, the project will move backward into prior steps to reevaluate before moving again to the commitment step. Again, we need the project to close within that 6 months window. It can close sooner. We understand that once we have final pro forma, it can close sooner than 6 months, but cannot close after 6 months. Assuming the project closes successfully, we've now completed the ORCA application process. So this concludes the final step of the ORCA. So the project moves into the construction phase and marches on to lease up and being placed in service. So before getting into our second questions and answers session, I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth, who's going to share with you all of the many ways in which we are able to provide you help and assistance with this ORCA applications process.
Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Carr with the applications team. So there's a couple of different ways you can get help with the ORCA. The first and probably the most important is the ORCA web pages that Ed has talked about already. These web pages have a lot of information, including what you see here, the Get Help page on this slide. On the Get Help page, you can view upcoming trainings that are scheduled. You can see our answered FAQs, and you can ask questions on our questions portal. You can also access pre-recorded trainings for some pieces of the ORCA process that Ed has already talked about, and I think Daniel did as well with the Procorum training. Those videos you can review at your own pace, so definitely take advantage of those. The questions portal, though, is going to be the main contact hub for your questions, suggestions, concerns, and requests for clarification. This questions portal allows OHCS to track questions that come in, see the amount of time it takes for us to respond, and assign the best equipped and knowledgeable staff member for each of your questions. Although you're free to email our team at the email at the bottom of this slide, and that has been posted in chat a few times, this portal is going to be extremely helpful. This is so that we can maintain an accurate master copy of all of the ORCA questions. The answered frequently asked questions, or FAQs, these are updated from that questions portal about once a week. There's not going to be an official OHCS announcement each time the FAQ is updated, so definitely check back periodically to review those questions. Something to note is we get a lot of questions in the portal. Not all of these questions are appropriate or helpful for FAQs, as they might be really specific to an asker's situation or project. Just because you submit a question to the questions portal doesn't mean you're going to see it on the FAQ page. Another way to receive assistance with ORCA is to attend office hours that the application team is going to host for our partners for you this summer. This is going to be dedicated time for you to hop on a call and speak to members of the app team live. The first date is scheduled, and that is Thursday, June 13th at 10 a.m. It's the day that work centers open for projects moving to impact assessment and out of intake. The rest of the office hour dates are still to be determined, but information is going to go out on the Get Help page. These events are going to be registration based, so we can best prepare to meet everyone's needs. So please don't forget to register. Back to you, Ed.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. With that, yeah, we're going to go into our next questions session. I'll go ahead and I'll hand it over to you to Kim, and you can kick us off.
Yeah. Well, we have a few in the chat, so I think we'll start there. And there was a question about how long can applicants expect for the review process for each stage of the application?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is one, I'm going to say this is a brand new process. And so at launch, we're looking at 30 days for the evaluation for the impact assessment. We're anticipating or expecting roughly a similar time frame between each step. But I could see where potentially that could be shorter in future steps, but that is something that we haven't had the opportunity to test that yet. So we're holding 30 days, but I believe in future iterations of our guidance that we're putting out there, there could be a future state in which those timings could become shorter. It just depends on how staff feel about their workflow and how that's working.
Hey, thanks, Ed. And then there was another question, I think, about timeline. That commitment would happen no more than 9 months before closing. However, the slide said 6 months. So are we saying that commitment will happen no earlier than 6 months before closing?
There's a so the commitment step, we want you to enter the commitment step no more than 9 months before closing. But once we've completed the commitment step, from completion of the commitment step, we're providing up to a 6-month window for closing to take place. And so that's where that 9 months comes in and where that 6 months comes in. So we're asking for that commitment step to take only about 3 months. But if it takes 4 months, then yeah, we want it to take 3 months is what I'm trying to say. So the commitment step is 3 months. Once we've completed that, we've completed the evaluation, we determined that we're ready to march towards closing, then we want the project to go ahead and march towards closing promptly. And we've provided 6 months, but hopefully for most projects, it won't actually take that much time.
All right, thank you, Ed. We have another question, and I think Mitch can take this one. Do projects go back to Housing Stability Council before the final reservation letter is issued?
Yeah, right now we are planning to just do a Housing Stability Council presentation and approval after the impact assessment step. That is similar to what Ed is saying, what we're going to start with and attempt to do. I think we might see some changes in the future if things aren't working as we want them to. But ideally, that gives them the chance to provide useful input on a project early on and provide an up to amount approval amount for a specific resource that we've allocated to you or held for you. And then as we move through the process, that gets firmer, but we have our own agency to do that because we've already gotten the up to amount.
Thank you, Mitch. Okay, and then a question about what is a financial closing commitment letter?
I have to read this.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah.
Essentially, I believe is related to one of the tasks that we have in the financial commitment is in agreement about the timing for the project.
Yeah,
So
thanks, Ed. I was wondering where that was referenced. Yes, we are asking folks to commit to a specific closing date so that we have a target to hold you to, because the whole point of this entire reorganization was to wait to commit and reserve funds until folks were ready to proceed. And we want to make sure we're holding people to those dates as best as possible. So we're asking folks to give us that date. That's 6 months from when that gets through the closing process or the award process for commitment. And then we're going to hold you to that, essentially. So that'll be a new kind of form that you'll have to fill out, but it's very simple. Just sort of give us your date and sign it and commit to it.
Thanks. Another question in the chat. What is the timeline for acquisition projects?
Yeah, good question. I'm guessing this is specific to kind of the acquisition of market rate housing, Martin, or is this something else? I'm not sure if yeah. So Lyft is going to be able to be used in specific instances to acquire market rate housing that is able to be converted to affordable rental housing. It has to be like new, and there's other sort of requirements that we've put on our website, and it will still be going through the ORCA process. It will still have to have review periods. It'll have stripped down requirements because some of these won't make a lot of sense for an existing building that we're leasing that is already has tenants in it. It's just a fundamentally different looking project, but we have a list of the standards that will apply to acquisition projects as well as the rest, and that these projects will have to be evaluated against.
Thanks, Mitch. And let's see, where are we at? A question about the June 13 office hours. Ed or team, do you want to take that? Is it only for applicants at a certain stage in the process, or is it open to everyone?
It is open to anyone who's interested in working on a project intake, anyone who's in financial commitment, impact. But we're releasing it the day after work centers are opening for folks moving into impact assessment. So this happens to be the day after a lot of people are going to get work centers open to them, but it is open for anyone.
Great. Thanks. Okay, I think that we have answered all the questions in the chat. Anyone have anything they want to ask live? We are great on time here, so don't hesitate to raise your hand. All right, Adam.
Thank you, Kim. Hey, this is related, but not specific to the ORCA process, and that is that I manage a 202 Prac HUD property here in Brookings, Oregon, and currently our waiting list is like 2 to 3 years. And as I get inquiries from people interested in getting on the waiting list, I'm always thinking, gee, I wish there was a source that I could refer people to that would publish the projects that are under construction now and are about to come online, with maybe the information of who to contact that's going to be doing the property management, so they could be, first in line to get on a list for a new project. And so my question is, does such a list exist? I know OHCS has a list of past projects. I don't know how current it is, but for upcoming projects, I was just curious if there's such a public list available.
Let's see.
Yeah, so I think the question was essentially, if you got an award from OHCS and your project is going to be, is in development and is in construction, is that posted anywhere on the website? Is that sort of where you were going with that question?
No, Mitch, it has to do more with people, specifically prospective tenants that are searching for where they can apply for subsidized housing. They probably wouldn't have a tendency, initially just to search the OHCS website to see about what cool projects are going on in the state. They're just looking for housing, period. And it would seem beneficial to those that are responsible for lease up if they had, maybe a shared source so people could contact them that were looking for housing. That's the question, really. Does it exist?
Definitely appreciate the idea, and it's something we've talked about a lot. Is how challenging it can be to maintain lists of vacant units and try to match tenants to those units for different properties. I know our PSH projects do a better job with that, probably because they have more of a strict kind of tenant referral process. But given the fact that we fund projects that have many different property managers that are kind of working off of their own marketing plans and things along those lines, it is pretty challenging to maintain one single public database. Would certainly be interested in having a conversation about that if folks have ideas. I think we are mostly coming at it from that supply side of funding units for folks and trying to help you all do your jobs effectively. And that's one of the reasons we prioritize the affirmative fair housing marketing plan, is to ensure that folks are adequately reaching out to community and trying to get tenants into their units. But yes, I think nothing that I know of right now that we have, but would love the idea for sure.
Thanks for the question, Adam, and thanks, Mitch. Abigail.
Yeah. And also Paul Sheldon here with Abigail in her office. We've had some correspondence with Kim about this, and I apologize if this is duplicative, but we're wading into this community of opportunity and have a number of projects in mind, most of which are designed to provide housing for formerly incarcerated people, low-income housing. Some of those people are not looking for long-term residence, they're in transition. Is transitional housing precluded from ORCA? Does it have to be long-term? How do you define long-term?
Yeah, I could probably help with that one, Mitch, and if you have anything more. So yes, through the Affordable Rental Housing Division, which is the division that ORCA is through, we are in long-term affordable housing. And so we do have another division within OHCS that does work with transitional housing. But yeah, transitional housing is unfortunately not one of the eligible types of projects that we're looking to fund through the funds that we've been given.
And once again, how do you define long-term?
And so long-term is generally defined as annual leases or longer.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
All right, Joni.
Yeah, actually two questions that are somewhat related. The first is, you mentioned there's limitations on how many applications a developer can have in each phase of this pipeline. Can you speak to that quickly? And then also, we were informed that we were unable to move a project through ORCA because on another project, we're asking for last gap resources. And I'm just curious about that policy and how they relate, because the last gap is sort of projects that were, in my mind, pre-ORCA. So it's like mixing old pipeline and new pipeline.
Thanks for the question, Joni. Mitch,
I can jump in and
okay.
yeah, it's just, so with the last gap resources, what we're saying is if you're accessing last gap before you have closed, then you have to get your project to closing before you can have any new projects. And really that's just to try to make sure that we're focused on this project that is needing support and trying to really get all of our resources behind that before we start kind of expanding into other project ideas. So once that project gets to closing though, the next day you can submit a new project and we can get you going. If the project has reached closing and is still is actively under construction, we are establishing a new policy, I believe 45 days after that funding has been awarded, then you can come back for more resources then. Again, same idea. We're wanting to make sure we can focus on that specific need that's arisen and fix that before we start spreading it more broadly. And the first question, oh, sorry, go ahead, Joni, if you want to follow up to that.
No, I'm just as many of the nonprofit developers have multiple projects in various stages of development. And what I just heard you say was that, and they fall apart and come together and fall apart and come together. So what scared me a little bit is like, okay, so if one falls apart and is looking risky, that you might put the other ones on hold.
If one falls apart and is looking risky and we need to step in with funding, then we are going to not allow any new projects into the mix there. I think that's the key distinction. And I think with the rolling process, that allows you to come in again the day after we get through this initial hurdle of solving the problem with this project. That's sort of and we absolutely understand that there's a lot of projects that people have balanced at once and that things happen with projects. But we want to make sure that this last gap resource is used as a last gap, kind of filler and to try to solve a problem at the 11th hour to fix the problem and move forward. And we think this is a way to kind of help us focus on that.
Okay, so going back to my first question is so what I heard is for today, if I'm looking at last gap, then I am ineligible to go through the ORCA process with a new project. But assuming that wasn't an issue, how many applications or how many projects could you have going through ORCA at once, seeing that each of these stages can take up to a year?
Yeah, so we've said 2 projects at each step, and not including intake. At intake, you can submit as many projects as you have in your pipeline, and we'll take them all. We'll see kind of what you've got and when you're planning to bring them in and things along those lines. Once you get into impact assessment, we'll have 2 projects there, and then financial eligibility the same. So theoretically, you could have 6 projects actively in the ORCA process at one time, 2 in commitment, 2 in financial eligibility, and 2 in impact assessment. And if you have 6, then that's, you know, a lot, and we'll have to probably work on what that timing will look like in terms of awards and moving from one to the other. And I think we can, you know, be flexible, especially as we're launching this process and seeing how this goes. But that's the intention at the moment.
So not
And
only
it's really 2,
construction.
it's 2 in the ORCA process. So once you get your reservation letter, where that's not technically in the ORCA process anymore because you're past the application stage.
So yes, so that there was a follow-up question from Brandon in the chat, but only 2 under construction at a time. And what you're saying is, once you have your final funding commitment and you're in construction, that
You're
number
past the
doesn't-
ORCA.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
right. Past the
never-
the ORCA centralized application process. Once we're in construction, we're in construction.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jillian?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, so that's 2, whether it's preservation or new construction at any one phase?
Correct.
That's right, yeah.
Okay. Thanks. That seems like that could be those are some really hard calls to make, whether you want to work on preserving your current project or fulfilling your obligations, other funding sources. Might be interesting to separate those 2 things.
I think we're hoping to be able to, you know, work with folks on their timing. So if you have a preservation project that you're going to be able to move through really quickly, then maybe we talk to you about doing that first. And I think as we, you know, beef up our applications team and we kind of get through this initial glut that we're getting, I think we're going to be able to work a little more closely with folks on what those timelines look like and trying to be able to align it best with you and work on it that way.
Certainly. I think I don't want to speak for everyone on the call, but I know that the anxiety in my voice is due to there's a lot of pent up demand and us all wanting to push everything that we have been sitting on through. So I think I know my team is sitting here trying to figure out how to be efficient about that, and I'm sure everybody else is too.
Yeah, and you know, part of that is frankly, you know, our own capacity at OHCS. You know, if every single person submits every single project they have on day one, and we have to start evaluating, I don't think we're going to be able to stick to the timelines that we're trying to commit to and work with you all as closely. So part of it is our own ability to do that, and I think that will improve as we get through this initial backlog. Because I think you're right. I think a lot of folks have been waiting to kind of go, and I think we're going to have to work with you all on when. On your prioritization of your projects and try to support you as best we can. I think we don't want this to be a super punitive thing, but we want to make sure you're, we have the ability to actually support you too.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for the questions. Thanks, Mitch. We do have a question in the chat about mixed commercial and residential. Is ORCA looking at the entire project or that we break out the residential components for the ORCA?
And hi, this is Becky Isom. I am working on the Performa. I would like to answer this question. The intent is that you tell us, we're going to focus on the residential component, but we're expecting that you will also include a lot of information about the commercial space. So that, but you're going to have to break it out, and we'll make it. The Performa will tell you if your commercial sources and uses do not balance. And it will make it the commercial piece needs to stand alone, and the residential piece will not be able to lean on the commercial space, which is a standard requirement that OHCS has had forever. So yes, we're expecting that you're going to have it broken out as a whole. Like we're going to look at it as a whole, and you're going to have the residential component broken out and the commercial section also broken out. I'm very excited to get this performa out in front of everybody.
Yeah, hey
Thank
Becky, it's Steven. I'm the one who asked that question. So both the commercial and the residential need to stand as a whole on their own, but it is considered one project from the ORCA perspective.
Correct. We want,
Got it.
especially since we're looking at co-locating early education, we really want to make sure that we're not hampering any of those items. So thank you.
All right.
Thank
I
you for the
appreciate it.
question.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. So Erica, go ahead.
Hi, yeah. I just I didn't hear this in the presentation, but I was wondering if you could let us know how the closing dates from OHCS are going to be picked. I know that those have been challenges in the past, and I don't know if are we picking a date now as the developer? Are you guys still giving us the date of closing? Is that something we're doing together? I apologize if you guys spoke on that.
No, thanks, Erica, for the question. I think this is the kind of that funding or closing date commitment letter that we brought up earlier, where you are telling us the date that you're going to be able to close, and we will work with you on getting to that date. If there's some reason in which OHCS is the problem and you're not able to get to closing in that at that date because of us, I think we would be amenable to working with you on that. But we're trying to get you to commit to a date and then hold you to it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Just real quick on, I can just because Adam threw it in the chat,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna. It does not exclude mixed income housing projects, but the resources that you get will be tied to the rules and regulations that we have around mixed income projects. But there is the ability to do that through our process. Yeah, but our resources can't pay for any units that are over 80% AMI. We don't have any programs that will fund those units at this point.
All right, thank you, Mitch. Great, we'll move on to the next slide and talk about some next steps. And I know there's probably some remaining questions, so we will put the link to the questions portal in the chat as you think of additional questions that we don't have time for today. But we do also want your feedback about this training. So we have a survey that we'll put in the chat. So please, we'd love to hear from you so that we can understand your needs and continuously improve our training and resources to support you in applying through the ORCA. So please complete the survey for us. Reminder about June 12th, pre-development and capacity building will open for applications on that day. If you have expressed an interest in the intake form, you will receive an email from the applications team with the link to that application, those applications for those programs. If you are not sure what you filled out on your intake form, email the applications team and they can help you with the intake form. And if you have some new interest in pre-development or capacity building, we'll make sure that you get that information on June 12th. We talked about the office hours scheduled for June 13th at 10 a.m. And the link for that registration was also posted in the chat, and we will put it in our follow-up email as well. And then we talked a bit earlier about the dashboard that will show resource allocation and being able to track that over time. Please watch for a technical advisory as we have new materials that will come or updates about the ORCA, including the dashboard. So with that, I think we will close out this training and offer our deep appreciation for all the interest in the ORCA, the great questions today, and please reach out as needed. Thank you so much.